All right, welcome back in. This is episode 115 of Catfish on Ice. This is your host, Chad Minton, with co-host Rich Howe, as we continue to react to NHL Trade Deadline Day 2022 and what the Nashville Predators did and what they didn't do, more or less. But either way, we are really excited to have Boyd Farish of Penalty Box Radio. Long time coming.
Yes,
he is joining us tonight. Big friend of the pod. If you follow Preds Twitter at all, then you need to be following Boyd. Welcome in, man. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Hey, really appreciate you guys having me. Glad to be here. I know it's been a long time coming, and what better opportunity than right after a both eventful day and also yet very uneventful trade deadline day.
Yeah, a little bit of both. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's been a long time coming for sure. We've been wanting to have you on here for a while, but tonight's a perfect night because there's a lot to talk about. No shortage of topics right now. The Preds are about to be playing the Anaheim Ducks again later on, so we're going to be reacting to that game live for episode 115 as the episode goes on. But of course, Boyd, tell us about how you got involved with Penalty Box Radio, which is it's a staple of the Nashville Predators local community. A lot of fans follow Penalty Box Radio. Of course, Justin Bradford is one of the all-time greats of the local Preds media. So I got a chance to meet you at a game recently. And so just kind of tell us about your journey getting into Preds writing and Penalty Box Radio.
Yeah, I mean, I was obviously a hockey fan for a long time, even going back to my childhood, watching the Red Wings Avalanche rivalries back in the Yzerman and Sakic days, Waugh and Osgood. So that was a great introduction to hockey. And when I eventually landed in Nashville, my first NHL game was a Predators Red Wings playoff game. So not a bad way to really start to experience it live.
For sure.
And really it was a case of I was watching a lot more hockey and started kind of hanging around the fringes of Predators socials and some of the various blogs and whatnot. And finally, I think it was probably 2016, 2017, I just started writing and thought, I'm not seeing some kind of article that I wanted to see, and it was probably around trades and free agency and stuff. And I'll just try to do this myself, and posted it to the reader space at on the forecheck. Got a little bit of my legs under me there and started to figure out that this is something that maybe I can do a little bit. And eventually just completely on a whim, just reached out to Justin Bradford and said, if you're looking for writers, here's some things I've done, and I'd be interested to come write for a Penalty Box Radio if they'd have me. And, Justin was more than welcoming. He pretty much just said, you seem to know what you're doing, so have at it, which is pretty impressive for someone like me who had never really written anything, was not a media or journalist person at all. So really it's just sort of been going from there. And then late last year, started up the Predator Way podcast and been trying to get that going a little bit around my own crazy life, which makes recording its own set of challenges, but
Absolutely.
Of course.
And teaching myself audio editing on the fly has been a real interesting challenge. But it's been fun, in a place in life where I don't have a lot of free time with kids and work and all of that stuff. It's been nice to have a little bit of an outlet that I can use to sort of
of course,
for sure, spend some time on something I have a lot of passion for. So it's been fun, cool to see where it goes at some point down the road. But for now, it's just a fun thing I get to do, and I get to hang out with you guys doing it. So
very cool.
Yes, definitely. And we get to watch hockey and talk hockey together. So what more can we ask for, right?
Exactly.
So Definitely. Well, that's awesome, man. And of course, Justin Bradford and Penalty Box Radio. I mean, they're one of the go-to sources for me. I know, like I appreciate the national outlets, of course, but the local writers and the people who like Justin Bradford and people like you, Boyd, who put the hard work in and do this as a passion. I appreciate that as well. And that's what makes this market so great is there's so many outlets and there's so many people you can follow that know what they're talking about. And it really makes following the team just that much better. And that's why hockey is really working in Nashville right now, is because of, people like you, people like Justin Bradford, all the people out there. I mean, we can go on and on about all the awesome people out there who are covering the Preds right now. So we're lucky for that. All right. So this is, again, episode 115. We're being joined by Boyd Farish of Penalty Box Radio. We're happy to have him on, friend of the pod. And so we are talking about the trade deadline, of course. And Boyd, you go ahead and just throw it right out at you right now. What are your overall thoughts about the Preds and what they did? They made some very minor moves, nothing major today. They got Jeremy Lauzon from Seattle for a second-round pick. I think that's what's throwing people off. Is not the player.
I don't know. I think it's morphed into the player now too.
Well, for me, it's not about. I don't think it's about the player. For me, it's more about what they gave up for it.
Right.
The player itself, Jeremy Lauzon, kind of fits what this team wants to do. But Boyd, give us your overall thoughts. What did the Preds do? How did they do? How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I would frame this trade deadline more than anything as a missed opportunity. As I looked at it, kind of reaching the end of last week, going into the weekend, and starting to see where some of the teams were looking, what some of the players that might actually be available, I really looked at three things that could be accomplished, somewhere between could be accomplished and should be accomplished by the trade deadline. One, obviously unrelated to trades, but was signing Filip Forsberg. And I know we'll get to that a little more later, but that had to be number one. Number two, and this is something that I've been really harping on over the last few weeks, is the Predators at 5-on-5 are not a very good offensive team. And I say that in the vein of they don't generate chances. They're actually below average. And when it gets to the playoffs where less penalties are called, you can't rely on the really, really high level power play that the Predators have. You have to be able to create chances and create offense. And the Predators don't really do that. So in my mind, the biggest need after just signing Forsberg and getting that part of the job done was someone who could drive play, especially into the top six. And where I saw that need was really around the role that Luke Kunin is currently filling. And don't get me wrong, I don't think Luke Kunin's a bad player. I don't think they should trade him. I think he has a spot in the lineup going forward, but it wouldn't be much of a reach to say he's struggled this year. And it's not for lack of opportunity. He's basically been in the top six all season. So you could say there was an opportunity to go get Max Domi, Phil Kessel, one of these guys who can drive offense, even if it's just a rental, but some of these guys that probably wouldn't cost that much to acquire, and at least give an opportunity to put a new face into that role and see if maybe that pops Ryan Johansson and Ellie Tolvanen just a little bit more. And then,
let me ask you something here, Boyd. Yeah, I just want to ask you something. So you bring up you bring up Luke Kunin, and it really makes you think, because as likable of a player he is, and he fits this team's identity, which that term gets thrown around by John Hines all the time, and for better or worse,
very much
for
so.
better or worse, that's the prevailing theme of this team is we have an identity, which I do agree that's important, and this team does have an identity, and it's nice to have that. But is Luke Kunin a top six player on a Stanley Cup contending team normally? I can't say that he is. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think he's more of a prototypical third line type of player that's going to be more of a tone setter, more of a, he's going to eat up 14, maybe 15 minutes of ice time, do some quality things for you. But so when you brought up Luke Cunningham just now, Boyd, I really thought that was a good point because he seemed like a trade. If you're going to trade someone on this team and kind of shake up the roster a little bit, which you got to be careful about, because after all, this team is not that far away from second place right now in the division. So you got to think about that. But he was the one player that I think we were all like, okay, he might be a player you could be okay with trading to get a Max Domi or a Phil Kessel, or you had a Ricard Raquel out there. You had these wingers who could really maybe make a difference for this team.
Definitely. I agree with you. What you said, that's a really sore spot right now, having the second line not be as productive as they should be. Luke Cunningham is definitely struggling. Obviously, in a different world on a different team, he probably would be on the third line, but not for the Predators. So secondary scoring would be huge for them right now. And like you said, that would be Cunningham would be someone who could have been moved for sure.
I mean, and honestly, I don't even think he needed to be moved per se, as much as there was an opportunity to put a different player in that role.
Right.
And Cunningham perhaps, splits time on what would effectively for this year's team be the fourth line.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, a Cunningham, McCarron, Tomasino, or Cunningham, Cousins, Tomasino would be a pretty dynamite fourth line. And it's made a little bit different because what on most teams would be the fourth line in the case of Trennan, Sissons, and Jeannot, for the Predators, that's effectively their third line.
Right.
And at times it's really their second line in just matchup and usage. So I don't even necessarily think Cunningham needs to be traded. I think he still could be a valuable player for this team. He's having a down year. And so, and I mean, especially if you look at someone like Phil Kessel, who probably could have been had for a third round pick.
And he's sticking around. So Arizona ended up keeping Kessel and Chikrin. So that was kind of surprising. But their asking price for Chikrin was insane, man. I mean, it was really, guys? Y'all. I mean, I know he's a good player and he could end up being a really good defenseman in this league. He already is, but yeah, that was. But I want to circle back to kind of more of the Preds moves that they did make today and what you think about them, Boyd. Again, we're being joined by Boyd Farish of Penalty Box Radio. So I'm looking at some of these other moves they made. I do think that one of the prevailing themes of this trade deadline day for the Preds was let's restock the shelves for Milwaukee a little bit. And you saw the trade between the Kings where longtime defenseman for Milwaukee, a defenseman that you thought could maybe eventually make the jump to the NHL, Frederick Allard, ends up getting traded to the Kings system, and the Preds get Braden Burke, which I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about. I had to do some research before tonight's episode. But he's a winger. He's had some good experience in the minor leagues. And maybe he's definitely going to boost Milwaukee's roster in the short term. And maybe eventually, who knows, maybe he can make the jump in. It was kind of a one-for-one swap. All right, we have a logjam of defenseman, Freddie Allard. We're sorry, we love you, but there's no room for you here. Let's make a one-for-one swap. That's what I saw out of that. What did you see out of that move, Boyd?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I would have loved to have seen Allard get more of a chance in Nashville. I always thought he was a very, very steady player that really kind of played a pro game, but there was something about the way he played or his game that just didn't mesh with what the Predators organization was looking for. So it was probably the right opportunity to make a move for him and get him into a new opportunity. And bring in another player that can maybe help out the scoring for the Admirals. Braden Burke, yeah, he's interesting. Played in Moose Jaw in the WHL, I believe, and I haven't had a chance to really dig into deep enough to find this, but I believe he played there with Tanner Jeannot.
Yes, I read that earlier today. Yep, that's for sure.
And in his final season, he had, I think, 82 assists and 113 points in the WHL. That's
wow.
That's strong.
That's a good season.
And just recently, even in the AHL, he put up a 52-point season in 2019-20. So he's got
and that was only in 51 games.
Yeah, he's got 4 seasons of AHL experience. So, I mean, it's sad to say this, but perhaps the best move of the day for the Preds in the NHL trade deadline is they added themselves maybe an interesting, decent project for the Milwaukee when it comes to their forwards, and a player who has a little bit of skill, because the Preds prospect pool has been really getting better over the last couple of years. You know, we've probably spent this entire episode really criticizing Poile and how he's handled today's trade deadline, but he's really drafted well over the last few seasons. And so the prospect pool, at least in my opinion, looks really good right now, and the future looks bright. And so it's sad to say this, but I think the most exciting move they made today was dealing Frederick Allard for this Braden Burke guy, who I think could be a decent addition to the prospect pool. And who knows, maybe a season or two down the road, he's a call-up and he can do something. You never know.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, that's, sometimes the best move is the move you don't make. And in this year, at least, there was a first for Paul Gostad. There was no Mike Santorelli and Cody Franzen coming back for a first, and Brendan Leipsic. So, while it's rightful to question the price paid for Jeremy Lauzon, and time will tell. It seems like they want to keep him in the organization. So maybe a second round pick for an NHL caliber defenseman ends up not being the worst price, even if he's not a world beater. At the very least, there was no overpayment, especially for a veteran type player. Mm-hmm. So if they weren't going to kind of push the chips in a little bit, which I might have liked to see them do. But
just devil's advocate here on the on that move, though, is really like, you see like a player like Justin Braun goes for a 3rd round pick to the New York Rangers, a more proven veteran. I feel like, and I really don't want to come down on Jeremy Lauzon, because honestly, he could end up coming in here tonight. For instance, he's making his debut for the Preds. Who knows? Like, it's not about the player for me. It's more about what you gave up and what you could have gotten for that same price, is I guess where I'm at on it. But it's not really about the player itself. And also, it's not about the player in the sense, for me, that is that really what the Preds needed, was another bruiser, another brawler, another player who sticks up for his teammates, quote unquote. That's what I keep seeing about Jeremy Lauzon. It's like, oh, he sticks up for his teammates. He won't back down. Okay, I love that. I love that we have all those types of players on this team. Is that really, were we missing one more of those types of players on this team? That's where you can't convince me. Is he going to change what this team can do in the first round? I'm sorry, but and David Poile said it in his quotes. He said, I'm focused on making this team more competitive in the 2022 Stanley Cup playoffs. Were you really missing another brawler, another bruiser, another player that doesn't take anything? I mean, I'm sorry, but I mean, I love all the taglines. I love I know that's good for social media. Like, oh, he hits. I'm sure we'll see it tonight. I'm sure he'll lay out a hit and the social media team will go nuts about it. But I mean, is that going to win you a Stanley Cup if that's really what Poile's talking about, being more competitive? I'm sorry. I know I'm cynical. I know.
A little
But
bit.
that's just
a little bit.
where I'm at.
A little bit. I kind of look at it a little bit as obviously the third defensive pairing was lacking at times. We know Borowiecki and Benning are both out. Borowiecki's playing tonight. Benning is still not playing. I think he's maybe got this guy to obviously shore up that, but maybe he knows that Benning's not going to be sticking around next year. And I will say that Lauzon is probably an upgrade to Matt Benning. He's probably a little bit tougher player than Matt Benning. You might get a little tad bit of offense out of him. Not much, but probably more than you would out of Matt Benning. So I kind of see it as a little bit of an upgrade. And I know people are upset about the second round, losing that second round pick, but I think it might wind up being good. I hope it does. I think it would be a little bit of an upgrade though.
So I'll say a couple things. One, the first will sort of be in defense of Jeremy Lauzon, and I know that's quite straying from everything I've said for the last 48 hours, but here's sort of two ways that I look at it. He wasn't brought in to play every night. He's basically brought in to be better than Ben Harper.
Right.
And I forget who tweeted this today, but it was basically if paying a second to make sure Harper never sees the ice again for the Predators, that might be worth it.
Oh my God.
That's a good point.
So you look at it that way. I think he can play left and right side. Yep. So there's some versatility. They're going to keep him in the organization, it seems. So I would say that part is where it's a second over a third for Braun, because Braun would have been just a pure rental.
He would have.
Now, that being said, to Chad, your question, does it make the Predators more competitive in the playoffs? Is assuming that most everybody is healthy? No, it really doesn't. That is where I look at it heavily from it's a significant missed opportunity. If you were really trying to be more competitive for the playoffs, you would have gone out and got Max Domi.
Mm-hmm.
Or you would have gone out and got Phil Kessel, because that was where the biggest need was. There wasn't necessarily a need for another tough third pair defenseman, but it's a case of it's not that tremendous of an overpayment for me to, really overly lose my mind outside of the initial reaction of, holy crap, we just paid a second round pick for a guy who at best plays on the third pair.
Exactly. And to be fair, a lot of people are upset too, because they think about Jeremy Davies. They think about really Jeremy Davies is the player that comes to mind where you're like, why would you go out and do this when you have Jeremy Davies out there who can fill that role? Or even Filip Myers, who I'm not really that high on Filip Myers. I mean, I know he scored a goal the other night. That was more a product of Roman Josi skating around and the entire defense was chasing him, and he found an open player, and to Filip Myers' credit, he made a good shot and he scored. But I'm not high on Filip Myers, and I would love to be wrong on that as well. But I just feel like, okay, so you got a little insurance with your defense now. Yeah, we know you've got plenty of options when it comes to your defensive depth. Now, if you're going to the playoffs, if you have injuries, like hopefully we don't have to throw Ben Harper in there for game one of the first round of the playoffs. I get that. But like you said, Boyd, missed opportunity. That I really love that you said that, because that's kind of how I feel about it as well. Because I feel like they could have been way more active today if they really were serious about being major players in this year's playoffs and upgrading their team immediately. And instead they really thought more about the long-term future, and that's fine. I mean, I'm okay with that. If you've got the long game in mind, That's fine. Okay, I'll be patient. But like, that's not what you're selling me. That's not what David Poile told me in the press conference today.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like and I know he has to say certain things. He's going to tell the fans what they want to hear. But I mean, it is. But I think David Poile is a great man. I mean, he's done so many great things for this organization. So, but I'm very confused. I come out of this. You say missed opportunity. I come out of this trade deadline. If you want me to use one word, confused. I come out confused. What is the direction of this organization? I think that's where I come out of this, because you can't have it both ways. You can't say we're rebuilding and we're thinking a long-term future, but we also want to win a Stanley Cup this year, and we're like, every team says that. Every team says they want to win a Stanley Cup. So give me something to go off of here. Give me something to chew on, and you didn't really do that. So now we're really rolling the dice and banking on this current team, which has overperformed this season. We're banking on this current team that they can really dig deep and do something special. And maybe they can't. Maybe they can't. But it feels like a missed opportunity. I really like what you said there, Boyd. I really agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's where I keep coming back to, because you've got, if you really look at it, you've got two wingers who have a very good chance to hit 40 goals each, which has never happened in franchise history.
Yeah.
You have a defenseman who's probably going to break 90 points and probably still not win the Norris, which is absurd.
Right.
You have a goalie who is top 5 in the league on an average day, top 3 on a good day.
Mm-hmm.
You have a third line rookie winger who's got 21 goals. Another third line winger who just scored his 15th.
And you've got Eli Tolvanen, who is completely not even performed up to the abilities we know he's capable of, and he's had bad luck this season as well.
He's wildly snake bitten.
Yeah,
he's actually it's I mean, from a metric perspective, and take that with a grain of salt, but he's been from a pure metrics, obviously not production. He's been one of the most effective Predators forwards the entire season.
Yeah, he's doing all the little things.
He's doing all the little things.
Mm-hmm.
He creates possession defensively. He keeps possession offensively. He creates chances. But God bless that boy. He can't get anything to go in the back of the net.
No.
And so when you frame it that way, when you really frame it that way, maybe this team can do something special. Why can't they do what they did in 2017? If there's any team that can do it recently, it's this team. I do agree with that. I know we had Robbie Stanley on last episode, and he was talking about how this team is absolutely capable of pulling off a first-round upset against Colorado because of the way they play with each other and the way they had that chemistry. And David Poile said the exact same thing basically in his press conference. Without quoting him verbatim, he basically alluded to that fact, that he didn't want to disrupt this team's chemistry. And I mean, sometimes you have to play chess and not checkers, right? And so we're all thinking about, oh, you got to make this move. You got to go do this. You got to do that. We're all talking about that. Armchair GMs over here. And David Poile, maybe David Poile is thinking more. We're all armchair GMs.
We're all guilty.
But David Poile might be thinking more.
Basically a personality trait for me.
Right.
Yeah, but it's fun to be an armchair GM though, because we don't have to deal with the consequences. But yeah. So I mean, it's tough, man. But like when you just list off what you just did with this current team and what they got, I mean, why can't we believe in this team? Why can't we roll the dice and see what happens? And I think that's what David Poile's doing. I mean, he was in a very tough position coming into this trade deadline. We were all talking about it the months leading up to it. Like, we were like, wow, this guy really has some tough decisions to make. It would have been very easy, this trade deadline, for him if this team performed the way everyone thought they would perform going into the season, which was 6th or 7th place, maybe. Maybe they would flirt with a wild card. But really, the team ceiling was, we were talking about it before the season on this episode, on this show. We were saying, me and Rich were like, let's just hope the team is exciting and fun to watch. We don't even care about the standings. Like, let's just hope they're good and they put on a good product with these young players. So Poile was in a tough position. He really was. And I think he chose to just not mess with it. I think if Filip Forsberg was re-signed right now, and I really want to get to this with you, Boyd, before we round it out here. I really want to get your thoughts on this. I think everyone would be totally okay with what happened today during the trade deadline if Filip Forsberg was re-signed right now. I don't think anyone cared about anything else. It's like a ripple effect. Forsberg's not re-signed, so now we're going to criticize Poile for all the other moves he makes that really aren't that significant. Yeah, they're not really even that significant of moves. So, and I'm guilty of it, honestly, because I want Forsberg re-signed.
Yeah, everybody's all salty. That's why. It's because they didn't get that Forsberg.
And in reality, it's very conceivable if Forsberg wants to be here, if he truly wants to be here, which is what Poile is trying to say is true, and I feel like it's true, then a deal can still get done before the end of the season. It doesn't mean that for sure he's gone just because he's not signed today. So, Boyd, give us your overall thoughts on it. I really want to know what you have to say. I've been following you on Twitter, so I know a lot of your thoughts already, but share it with our listeners. You have a lot of good opinions on this, and I want you to share it with our listeners.
Yeah, my opinion on Forsberg, it's a couple things. I agree he wants to stay. Like, I don't think that's a mystery. He would rather stay than go, both from a team fit. He likes it here, and as the adage goes, he doesn't want to move his stuff. It's already here, and he's going to get paid well to be here and continue to be a star of the team, a face of the franchise. The challenge is, he's coming off a pretty decent contract, $6 million, but this is probably his real opportunity to truly get that big payday. And it just so happens he's going to set basically every scoring record in the Predators book by the end of the season.
That's true.
Except for career points, that Yossi's going to own that till the end of time. But it's a situation where each party is trying to do the best for themselves. I don't agree with the concept that Poile is aggressively lowballing. I don't think that's ever been something he's done. At least not with the star players, with his guys. He is someone that historically he does squeeze players in negotiations. He's always done that. Whether it's Ellis, whether it was
you're hearing about these no move clauses, I think is what it comes down to, Boyd. Have you heard that as well? Like, maybe that's the sticking point, is a no move clause.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the challenge, is we don't really have any confirmation to that. It's all speculation.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah.
I've actually sort of assumed the other way. I mean, again, purely speculative. I don't think Poile is going to have trouble giving up some measure of trade protection for Forsberg. He's the greatest forward this team has ever had.
Exactly. Yeah.
In the same way that Yossi is the greatest defenseman the team has ever had.
And like, even though I know he wasn't a prototypical, like the Preds didn't draft him, I know he was technically traded for, but Forsberg has played his entire NHL career in this uniform. How bad is it going to look on this franchise and David Poile, but more or less this franchise in general, for future free agents and future players, if you let a player like that just go because you just didn't want to pony up and you didn't want to, like, I get that there's this camp out there, and I totally understand it, but there's this camp out there that's out there saying, a lot of people are saying this, that, this is all fool's gold. Forsberg's not going to do this in a couple seasons. He's just having an insane season. His shooting percentage is way up there, all that stuff. I get that, but you could play that game with anybody you're going to re-sign. It's always a risk when you re-sign a player, unless you have a Connor McDavid or an Austin or one of these generationally great players in your back pocket, you're always taking a risk of that player declining. If you play that game, if you play that game of, oh, well, I can't pay this player because he might not be as good next year, well, then you're never going to have any good players. You're just always going to be shipping players off left and right, and you're going to constantly just have to grow. Like, I just don't agree with that thinking. Like, even if it does blow,
at that point, you're playing a video game.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, even if it does blow up in decline,
so trade him away.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, yeah, of course it could happen. Of course it could happen. But you can't play these what ifs with a player like Forsberg. I just don't agree with it. Like, I just don't. Yeah. It's not like he was chopped liver before this season. That's what really throws me off. It's like I could understand if he like came out of nowhere this season and we were talking about this, but the guy was still a great player before this season, and he's just happened to have a career year during his contract season. More power to him. More power to him. Good for you, Filip Forsberg. You picked the perfect season to have a career year.
This whole thing is like if you crossed a chess game with a crapshoot. I mean, it's all just what ifs, man. There's no way of knowing for sure anything. So
yeah. All right. So this is episode 115 of Catfish on Ice. We have been joined by Boyd Farish of Penalty Box Radio. We're gonna get you out of here with this, Boyd. How far do you think this team can actually go now that we're past the trade deadline? We have a pretty good idea of what this playoff roster is going to look like. I'd really love to hear your honest expectations. You can even talk about potential matchups, who they might face if they make the playoffs and all this stuff. I really want to just get your overall expectations now post-trade deadline for this team.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a team that, based on the way they've played this year and the type of game they play, they are extremely physical. And honestly, they're one of the best defensive teams in the league. It's actually been sort of it's been a bit of an undersold narrative, just because Yossi, Duchesne, Forsberg, Saros are sort of stealing all the headlines about it. But the Predators' defense is one of the best in the NHL at limiting chances, and especially high danger chances, which is quite a pivot from the last couple of years where they couldn't move anybody from the front of the net. But they are one of the best defensive teams in the league. They have two elite scoring forwards right now and an elite defenseman offensively and an elite defensively. They have a goalie who's playing at an elite level. That is a team that is built to win in the playoffs with one problem. They don't create chances at 5-on-5. That is the one thing that will hold them back, in the sense that they will have to, in the playoffs where everything gets tougher, they will have to continue to finish at this absolute elite level that they have this season. It's possible they could still do it, but it's going to be more challenging. So if things continue the way they are, certainly a little bit based on matchups, they could be a conference final team. There's no reason they couldn't.
I love it.
I like it.
Love it.
Could they beat? I mean,
all right.
if you run down anyone outside of Colorado, Calgary, Minnesota, St. Louis, Edmonton, I could see the Predators beating any one of those teams in a 7.
Maybe LA sneaks in there. Don't leave out LA. LA's hanging around.
Don't leave out LA. But them too. I mean, I could see it.
I see what you're saying, man. I love the optimism. It's going to make for a really good last part of the season here. It really is. Boyd, it's been awesome having you join us here for episode 115 of Catfish on Ice. You're welcome back anytime. We will definitely have you back if you want to come back. We love talking hockey with you, man.
Hey, really appreciate you guys having me. It's been a blast. Looking forward to the rest of the season and joining you guys again sometime soon. And
awesome.
Definitely.
We'll talk about it again.
Before we let you go, tell all the listeners where they can find your work, how they can follow you on Twitter and all that stuff. Tell all of our listeners to do that.
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at Boyd_1212. my written work at penaltyboxradio.com and the Predator Way podcast on any of the main podcasting services. Just search for Penalty Box Radio and you'll find it.
Awesome.
We'll do a collaboration with you sometime to come on your
Absolutely.
podcast as well.
I'm
The
glad to have
Predator
you.
Way podcast. Yes, we will do that. We will coordinate that. Thanks everyone for listening and watching on our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. This has been episode 115 of Catfish on Ice, brought to you by DraftKings and part of the Hockey Podcast Network. Everyone have a great week. We will talk to you later this week for a brand new episode. See us on Thursday. Take care, everybody.
Have a good one.